Hi guys, this is Mahou Shoujo M coming to you live from the editing room floor. This may shock some of you to find out, but That Kodocha Girl and I do not record in the same room. We meet on Zoom and we record the calls audio, which then becomes our podcast episodes. As you can probably tell from our other episodes, this generally works pretty well. In today's, it went less well. There are some audio delays that resulted in us talking over each other, which we didn't really realize was happening in the moment. We did our best to manage it, but it was a challenge. So please just bear with us and enjoy the episode.
Welcome, everybody, to the next episode of 19 O'Clock News, featuring myself, That Kodocha Girl, and Mahou Shoujo M.
Hello, it is me. I am here. Sorry, we got the giggles today, folks, so bear with us. But today we're going to talk about episode 13 / chapter 11. My name is going to change, which is all about the best boy, Tsuyoshi, a baby, an angel. A baby angel, if you will.
So this is one of my favorite episodes. I actually talked about this episode a bit on my channel in my Tsuyoshi video. Definitely go check that out if you want to. I really like this episode because there's a lot going on in it. We don't just get a whole episode about what's going on with Tsuyoshi, but we get a lot of Sana and Kido moments as well that are pretty hilarious.
Oh, 100%. We got some firsts in this episode. All kinds of good stuff. I'm excited. So I've divided my notes into just like general notes about the plot and then like sub and then dub and then manga differences in thoughts. So do we want to just like start from the beginning of the episode?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay. Woohoo! I one of my first notes I have is like, you know how sometimes you'll watch like a movie or a TV show and they're like, New York City is a character in this TV show or in this movie. Like the backdrop is a character. I feel like 90s technology is a character in Kodocha because it
Oh,
has
absolutely.
so much to do with everything. Like, and I think probably younger listeners might not understand this, but like moving was kind of the end of the world in the 90s, especially when you were a kid, because like your home phone would be disconnected, you would move, and then your friends like might not be able to get in touch with you. And then like that was it until Facebook, pretty much.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I'm old enough to even remember, and I was very young in the late 90s, but early 2000s, it kind of bleeds over into that.
Mhm.
And even I remember how life used to be. And it's very, very interesting. And it makes you wonder how we survived
Yeah.
without social media and texting and cell phones and everything that we have now.
Oh, truly. Because, like, I don't know about you, but like, I think about like friends that I had as a child that moved or something. I lived in a big military town. So, folks are kind of coming and going every 2 years. And it's like, I can't trust my like first or second grade memory to like know I had the right last name for that person, And of course, at this point, like, people are probably married or, have changed names or lots of other things happen. So you just like lose touch with people and just like never see them again. So I feel like that's some of the panic that we see in Akito and San at the beginning of this episode.
Yeah, that makes sense. I actually have a memory of when I was in elementary school. I had a friend, and I considered her probably one of my closest friends in school. And then I just remember she didn't come to school the next year, and we found out that she moved. And I never heard from her again until Facebook, like
Woohoo!
more than 10 years later. We still talk every once in a while, not very often, but it was just like, as a kid, that was so devastating and
Oh,
kind of scary, honestly, because it's like, where'd she go? Well, there's no explanation given, what's going on.
yeah, and it does kind of come back to that conversation too that we've had a few times on this channel with just like or being a child and being like really powerless, I think, in those scenarios when you're
Hmm.
moving. It's like you just don't know where people are gonna go or end up. I feel like this theme also kind of happens a little bit in the manga in volume 9, maybe
Hmm.
8, where Kazuyuki is moving and then there is also a panic response to that because
Hmm.
they're just gone at that point in the year of our Lord 1996. Like that was just it.
Oh yeah. This also made me think of our last episode when we talked about Mr. Hayama and him getting sick and going to the hospital.
Hmm.
Like they were probably terrified, if something happened to him, they'd have to move in with their aunt, and it would have been a weird situation, very different, very chaotic. And this episode we're going to talk about today, I think, ties in with that theme that we're talking about how the children in the series are at the mercy of the adults, and it's true to real life as well. And I think, especially, like, I'm not a parent, but I feel like as a parent it's very important to think about the environments that you put your children in. And what you were saying, and the theme that we're touching on today, made me think of that. Like, it really is scary, I think. And to us, as two grown women, the idea of moving might be a little intimidating, but it's not like the end of the world, like you said.
Hmm.
But as a child, it's just like it really captures that mindset really well in the children, I think.
I agree. It's just interesting too, because like I think about just like when I have kids one day, like that's not something that they're going to like identify with the same way. Just because like even from very, very young ages now, like kids' lives are so integrated with technology. And
Hmm.
because that technology web is so much more far reaching than it was when we were children, I'm glad on some levels that like kids these days like don't have to experience like losing track of or touch with people, but or probably like less so.
Oh yeah.
And so that's kind of why I'm like, I feel like 90s technology is a character in Kodocha because it does. And I mean, even like later in this episode, you didn't pick up the phone at like this number, like call back to your house and see if you called there. Like that was so like just home phones. Remember
Yep.
home line? Like what is a landline? Who is she?
Yeah,
It's been
I
years.
I haven't had one probably in like 15 years. But
Oh, my parents
also,
just disconnected theirs. Like just disconnected theirs.
you have the Barucha in Kadocha as well. So that's how they
Yes.
stay in touch. It's like a cell phone without this, or a smartphone without the screen. You just press a button and it vibrates in your pocket, and
Yeah.
it's just so simple,
Like a
But
vibrating walkie-talkie almost. Like, although the
yeah, I
range on
mean,
the Barucha is something crazy. Like, because you were like, what?
isn't that what Ray calls it in the first episode? Here's Barucha, the vibrating walkie-talkie.
Oh, okay, there you go. Because although, yeah, the range on those just crazy. Because like, I don't know if you remember using walkie-talkies much, but like, I feel like those things tapped out at like, I don't know, what, 100 feet, like,
Oh yeah, I remember, like, I think one time I had a friend, like, I gave her one of my walkie-talkies to, like, take to her house, like, and we were gonna like be able to talk on it, like, from like
Oh,
her house, which was like 20 minutes away.
oh no.
It didn't work.
Didn't quite work. They do make
Yep.
like fancy industrial ones that do have a much further range, but like I feel like the ones that you could get at a Radio Shack a million years ago really didn't have much range. So good job, Barucha, whoever made those. Anyway, I guess the episode.
Yes, of course. So in this episode, we find out that Tsuyoshi's parents are getting a divorce, so that's why he ends up having to move. At the beginning of the episode, Sana and Akito go to confront Tsuyoshi's dad. He's a pretty scary dude.
Yeah, that guy is so much. I also, this is just a random little note, but when I was watching the dubbed version of the episode, I was like, this voice, this voice, this voice, this voice, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? And it is Justin Cook, who, in the grand tradition of Fruits Basket voice actors also working on Kodocha, is the voice of Hatsuharu Soma.
Oh, yeah, because I was wondering who voiced him too, and I couldn't figure it out. But I knew I'd heard that voice before, and I feel like I've heard him also in a shonen anime, but I can't place it. Like he was in like Yu Hakusho or something.
Oh, probably. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. But that was the one that I was like, why do I know you? Who are you? And that was why. It was kind of weird, like, I don't know, just because Tsuyoshi's dad is so like kind of mean and balding and stuff, and then in Fruits Basket, Hatsuharu is one of my favorite characters. So I'm like, no, I'm
Yeah, I
conflicted and
have
confused.
I have a massive crush on Hatsuhara.
Girl, yeah, same. He's such a goober.
Yeah,
Uh,
forget about Kyo and Yuki. Like, that's my man right there.
I love it. I totally get it. Yeah, Tsushi's dad's a real piece of work. And I'm like, I thought it was really kind of nice that they acknowledged, especially at the end of the episode, that like even if you do have like an abusive parent, like they are still your parent and that relationship is always going to be like very complicated. I don't know. It's like Tsuyoshi is definitely like putting some space there, which I think is absolutely the right decision given everything, but like they definitely sort of show that like he's even though he's a not good person who has done bad things to his family, which is why they have left, you kind of still see his like his loneliness, and Sana picks up on it almost immediately.
Yeah.
And I kind of appreciate that they let it be messy, not tied up with a bow at the end, you know?
Yeah. That's why I love this series so much, is because like the way they present things is just it's just so realistic. Like I feel like that
Mm-hmm.
lacks in a lot of series that I've watched. Like it just it feels so real, and I
Mm-hmm.
like how Kadocha's not afraid to tackle these things and just show the reality and the rawness of how these things can be in real life. And I could definitely relate to Tsuyoshi here because it's like you said, it's messy, and it's just like in Tsuyoshi's case, like could I have done that at 11 years old? No, I could not have been as mature as him. um
Surely. Mm-hmm.
but the show had an audience of children, so I think it was good, that they were exposed to that, because those situations are complicated, and showing how an appropriate response to the situation to children that age who might be going through the same things, I think is very positive. And we don't get a lot of that, I feel like, in shows. I feel like sometimes shows are just made to entertain, and I like the shows that touch on the truth. And that's why this is one of my favorite episodes, because it's just such a very, very realistic situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the responses too, like you said, are I don't know. It's I think Tsuyoshi is such a character I find very encouraging in a lot of ways. All of the characters of Kodocha, really, I definitely think I can take some comfort in, like thinking about how they've handled their situations. And certainly that's been true over the course of my life as I think about like this show and the characters and what they've meant to me. I don't know. Tsuyoshi just, even though he's put under a lot of pressure and he's clearly so stressed by all of this, he definitely he stays, I feel like he stays himself. He stays very true to himself, and he stays generally very positive throughout
Mm-hmm.
this experience, even though it's so hard and he's bearing the brunt of so much pressure. I can't
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine, but I find it admirable and like comforting in a way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like Tsuyoshi's getting through it. I can send my little emails. Like.
Yeah, I totally get that. And that's why I said, like, I like the shows that aren't just there to make you laugh or make you cry. I like the shows that also show you that sometimes things don't always have a happy ending, and sometimes you just have to get through things. And I feel like Kadocha's a series where people just have to get through things. And we've kind of been jumping, like at the beginning, we jumped to volume 9. I'd
Oops,
like to
sorry.
jump to Oh, no, 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 you're fine. But I'd like to jump to volume 10. Like I don't want to really reveal spoilers for the people listening who maybe haven't gotten there yet or haven't read the manga, but there's a situation where Sana and Akito kind of just have to go through it. It's not really the happiest ending, but eventually they reunite. We
Yeah.
get deep clear, and all the other things. But the end of Kadocha is, they just have to push through it, and it's not the best situation. It's a really sad situation, and I cried so much reading that.
Yeah. Oh, I hear you. But that's kind of that's life. And I do appreciate that. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm a sucker for a happy ending. Like based on my name that I use everywhere, Mahou Shoujo M, you can probably guess that one of my favorite genres is magical girl series, which do tend to be tied up pretty neatly with a bow at the end for the most part.
Mhm.
Obviously there are exceptions to this, but so I love a happy ending, but I also really appreciate something that reflects life, which is that sometimes there isn't a resolution.
Mhm.
There's just a moment or a conversation, and you kind of got to keep moving forward.
Yeah, I
So,
totally agree. But yeah, I always like indulging in the comfort shows too,
hmm
because I
hmm
love magical girl anime as well. And one of my comfort shows is Shugochara.
It's been on my list because you've always spoken so highly of it.
Yeah, it's really great. I highly recommend it. It's kind of strange because when Crunchyroll was growing in popularity in the late 2000s, Shugochara was one of those shows that they promoted all the time, and I remember it was like one of the top shows on the site. And then just
Oh.
about 5 years into the future, like it just kind of faded away, and then a lot of people don't seem to remember it, and it's very strange. And there were some things in it that were odd, but I think overall the messages in that series were really true to life, but you also had that warm and fuzzy feeling of, the romance and the I'm pretty sure that in that series had a happy ending as well. I haven't watched the end of the anime, but I know in the manga it's, everybody kind of gets with their significant other, that it had been
You love to
building
see
through the
it.
series. So
Perfect. Good. That's what I want, actually. So Discotech did a release of Saint Tail. And in their like most recent Discotech Day or whatever, they, somebody was like, would you consider doing X Magical Girl anime? And they were like, if everybody buys Saint Tail. And so I said, fine, I will buy Saint Tail. Like remember thinking like watching a couple of episodes on YouTube a million years ago and thinking it was cute. And like, let me tell you, it's adorable. Like, I will also tell you, not one thing has like happened. I'm almost done with the anime. Like there's been very little movement in terms of like plot going forward, but I'm having the best time. Like
that's great.
it's so cute. Like
I thought about
anyways,
buying that myself because
yes.
I think you posted about it on Twitter, and I was like, that looks cute.
It's so cute. And honestly, and the remaster is great in typical discotheque fashion. Like it still keeps its very 90s like feel. But like it's very clear, resolution's great, sound is great. And it's just cute AF. I'm gonna read the manga after I wrap up the anime, but it's just too cute. It's just too cute. So 10 out of 10 do recommend. I love a magical girl anime. Anyway, I got us off topic almost immediately. Oops.
That's okay. So back to the episode. So we talked a bit about them confronting Tsushi's dad. So one little difference I noticed in the dub versus the sub was in the English dub, Akito calls him a bald-headed jerk on the what do you call that thingy? The yak
Yeah,
back.
I have the Yak Back. There you go. That's a good one. I just had voice for Peter in my notes.
And in the Japanese version, he's a hairless old coot.
Like I either or, I like it both. That feels like a solid gets the feeling across translation. And
Yep.
I think is this Akito's first use of the voice repeater?
Yeah, I think so.
The Yak Back.
I think this is like right after he gets the barucha too, so he's,
Yeah.
he's been notified. He
He's
starts
yes.
to wear the Babbitt pin on his shirt too.
Yeah, that's a good point. I love that.
Have you noticed that when she gives someone a barucha, they wear a Babbitt pin on their shirt?
I did not until you just said that.
Yeah,
That's fantastic. I love this fun
because
fact. Oh my
I'm
God.
pretty sure Akito never wore a Babbitt pin until that happened in the last episode we talked about.
Yeah, because he gets the baruch at the end of episode 12. Yeah.
Yeah,
Ah, or 11? 12. 11,
11.
12.
Yep.
11. Yeah. Ah, that's so fun. Also, for this episode, I'm like, if you don't mind, I'm gonna shift us away from Tsuyoshi's dad and bring up, I feel like, our first Akito and Sana silly moment. Unless you have
Oh
anything to
yeah,
add on Tsuyoshi's dad. But
I don't.
episode 13, this marks the first boob grab of the series.
Uh,
So that happens. And like
yeah,
when I first saw this episode when I was 13, I was like, is this the height of comedy? And now I'm like, like
yeah, because it's weird, but then again, like he's a boy. He's 11 or 12
yeah,
at this point. Boys are
yeah.
no offense to our male listeners, but man, teenage boys and preteen boys, they can do some interesting things. I'll leave it at that.
They can. I do sort of headcanon that like maybe at some point after Akito comes back to Japan, like that him and Sana have like a conversation about consent. Like that's just sort of something that I think has to happen at some point because like that's just not something you can keep doing.
Yeah,
My bud, my bro.
I I kind of have that too. Like I figured like they talked about it at some point when they got a little older, like, hey, remember that time when you touched me that way? Yeah, I didn't like that.
Yeah, because like he does it in volume 10 too. Like when
Yeah.
they're at the cafe with Tsuyoshi and Aya, like I was like, boy, what are you doing?
He's so nonchalant about it too, which makes it even I
Always.
think that's the joke. It's like
Absolutely.
because he's so like they don't make him come across as this weird pervert and he's not, you know. I think like if they did have that conversation at one point, he would respond very respectfully, you know.
No, I
Um
completely agree. And I feel like he says it not in this episode, but I think in the Promise Summer Part 1. I think like when Sana and him are trapped at the bottom of the cliff, and he's like, if you don't want me to, like I won't. And which is like not a great response, but I guess it's better than him just continuing to do that.
Yeah, and then you have to think about like, and again, I don't know like how much of it is like a cultural influence, or you also have to think about the time. You know,
Hmm.
things are a lot different now. Like consent, like you said, it's a much bigger deal than how it used to be. And you have to think about the time period and the just like maybe the cultural details of that. Like, you know, Akito at that time, he's 11 years old. You know, maybe Fuyuki was not an influence in that way, but maybe he just was surrounded by men who would do those things and it would be normalized. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting that you kind of bring this up because groping and sexual harassment has been a big problem in Japan for a very long time, and actually they're just starting to pass legislation. Basically, a lot of groping happens on subway cars and is typically not reported because it's typically happening to school-aged girls who don't want to be penalized for being late to school. So they are now passing legislation basically like making it so that like girls won't be penalized for like reporting what happened to them so that they can do a better job of stopping it. So that's something, but I think a lot of it's just like, and I mean in this country too, like people sexual assault and harassment goes extremely underreported and always has in a variety of industries. So I think
Mhm.
it's also just like the changing of the times a bit, but this was written at a time when it was probably still swept under the rug a bit, you know?
Yeah, and that's very interesting. I didn't know that about Japan, but you know, I'm glad they're working to get this to, you know, go away. You know, I feel like personally, I think, you know, these things unfortunately are never gonna stop completely, but I think as long as we implement into education, you know, teach young boys about how to be respectful
Mhm.
to girls of all ages, I think that would help immensely. Like having that as a priority in education. Also, you know, parents being good role models for their boys as well.
Absolutely. And also just like letting kids know that they do have some autonomy over their body and their space. Like
Mhm.
I don't know about you, my parents weren't bad about it, but certainly there were a lot of like forced physical interactions with family members because like they didn't want me to be perceived as rude. You know, like even if I didn't really want to hug great uncle whoever who I don't know very well, you know, you're still kind of like pushed into it. And so I've
Yeah.
started with my like my you know my cousin's kids, my younger family members, just being like, do you want a hug or a high five or neither? Because like if they don't want to touch me, they don't have to. It's like it's their prerogative how they have any kind of interaction with me, right? So I'm
Mhm.
hopeful that we start being more like, because I think that the two things are intertwined, right? People feeling like they can invade a child's space or like take advantage of them in that way is often exacerbated by the fact that like that kid doesn't feel like they have control over their body and how it is.
Yeah, my parents, I mean, I always was taught about boundaries and being respectful of other people's space, and I never really had that issue. I had like aunts who would like
Mhm.
hug me. I personally don't care, but I know other people like don't want to be hugged. Like I had a really good friend who she just like did not like hugs at all from
Yeah.
anybody. And like I kind of just got to the point like because of her really like if I want to hug somebody, I will ask before because I just would feel awkward just like just coming over to you and just wrapping my arms around you, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I totally hear you. I think it's something that it's good to be respectful of people's space that way. And I'm glad that I think we've kind of moved past assuming that people are going to be okay with how you want to interact with them. And also acknowledging that that doesn't have to be the same response every single time. Like my cousin's son, for instance, it's like, okay, hugs, high fives, nothing. Sometimes it's a high five, sometimes it is a hug, sometimes he just wants to like put on his shoes and get going. And that's totally fine. I am not offended or hurt by that choice. Like,
Mhm.
so I don't know. I think we got a little
Yeah.
philosophical there, but I will link when we post this episode to that article about the legislation, just if anybody's curious.
Yeah, I'd love to read that myself too, because
Yeah,
that's very interesting. And
I'll message it
I
to you.
wonder if there's anything like that here going to happen, but that's a topic for another day.
Oh, that it is.
So one thing I'd like to point out in this episode, and I actually pointed this out on my channel a long time ago, and I noticed this like the first time I watched it because I remembered I really liked the music in the background, and they never played it again. So there's the scene when Sana and Akito they found Tsuyoshi. He ends up being in the hospital with Fuyuki, and they're
Yes.
eating apples.
Yeah.
And
Fuyuki just eating apples. I mm,
so it's after the scene, or just, I don't know if it's right after the scene, because I think the moving montage is after this when they go to the
uh
house or the new apartment, I
yeah.
think. So they get to the scene when it's Sana and Akito and they're walking with Tsuyoshi just around town, and they stop and Tsuyoshi starts to cry because he's just overwhelmed by everything that's going on, and he's overwhelmed
Yeah.
by the fact that he has this expectation now to be the man of the house. And so in the background, there's a song that plays, and it's actually a slowed down instrumental version of the theme song, the first opening theme, 19 O'Clock News. And as far as I know, we never hear this version again. And it's not on the soundtracks. It's
Nope.
just, yeah, it's just not, it just doesn't exist anymore after this moment. And I think it plays one more time at the very end. And
Yeah.
this was actually in the original English dub Funimation DVD as well, which I found very
Yeah.
interesting because the first opening was taken out of the original English release. And to my disappointment, because I actually prefer, it's probably an unpopular opinion, but I prefer the first opening, the Kodocha.
I don't think that's unpopular opinion. I actually feel like a lot of people are on our side with that one. Ultra Relax is a fun time, but it is not, I think, as I don't know. I'm not going to repeat myself because we've had this conversation already about how we feel like the Ultra Relax doesn't really give you a good idea of what the show is about. It's just silly, which is like fun. But 19 O'Clock News like gives you a pretty fun overview of the characters.
But I will say this about 19 O'Clock News, the opening. That was actually the first time I ever knew what Kodocha was. Like, I found that opening on YouTube. And when I watched it, and then I watched the series, it completely destroyed my expectations because when I watched the opening, if
Oh,
you
that's
watch it
right.
without context, you think that Sana is in love with him because she's like in that opening, she's kind of sneaking around, taking pictures of him, and she's looking at him very longingly in some moments, and he kind of just has the blank Akito
Yeah.
expression.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh, it's about a girl who's like in love with this guy, and he's like really irritated by her, and like, but they're eventually gonna fall in love, and he's gonna fall in love with her somehow. But no, complete opposite.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. I do love this like kind of slowed down version of 19 O'Clock News though. It's kind of synthy and fun, and I do wish it was on one of the soundtracks because it's really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good time. It's a good time. That scene also, like two things about that particular scene. One, my note is all caps. I wrote Tsuyoshi, my son, I cry too. Because my sweet angel boy is so sad, and I'm sad for him. But also I love that moment where he's thanking Sana and Akito, and Sana's like, oh, it was no trouble at all. And then she like makes Akito also kind of bow repeatedly, which made me laugh.
Yes.
And this is actually the scene that has my translation fixation of the week Do you want me to get
All
into
right, let's
it?
hear it. Let's hear
Translation
it.
fixation of the week.
We should make this a real segment.
Because there's gonna be one every episode. So I will say, like, I try because, like, I understand. Like, I'm not a purist when it comes to translation. Like, I think that context is important, and I think, like, if you can come up with something in English or in the other language that just like captures the same feeling, that's totally fine. But when you get like the sub, the dub, and the manga all kind of saying different things, I go, I want to look in my Japanese versions of the manga and see what I can find. So
Mhm.
I did, and it took a bit of digging, but it's basically when Tsuyoshi is like, will you marry me? When Sana is like, what can I do for you? And then she gives a different excuse in each version. So I think in the English version of the manga, she's like, I'm too young to get married. In the sub, I don't remember what she says in the anime because I didn't write it down. Do you happen to remember what her excuses were?
Shoot, I remember there being a difference, but I let me just skim through this and see my notes here. Man, I wrote down something and I'm just wondering, I really should have put like where it came from, but I just put Tsuyoshi and in quotes taking your name question mark. I'm just
Yes.
wondering
Oh,
what was I
I
talking
did
about?
write it down. So I think in the sub, she says something like, "Whoever marries me will have to take my last name," or and then in the dub, she says like, "Oh, whoever I marry will have to live with me at my house." So those are the three, like, take my last name, live with me at my house, or I'm too young to get married. And I said
Yeah.
those are all three different excuses. What is this? So in a very literal, my broken Japanese, horrible translation, the literal phrase is like, I need a mukoyoshi, so you can't do it. And a mukoyoshi is where I really kind of like fell down a rabbit hole because I was like, okay, I don't know what that word means. And essentially it means like adopted son-in-law. And so basically when there is no male heir in a Japanese family, like they will often adopt a son-in-law to marry the daughter. Basically, it's typically happens in like business relationships. So like if like the CEO of a company has a daughter, then they will adopt somebody, like basically groom them to be the next CEO and then have them marry the daughter just to like kind of keep it all in the family. So that's
Hmm.
very common still, that happens. And so because Sana is the only daughter in her family, you know, she's saying that, which I think is really interesting for two reasons. One, like Misako obviously is a very single woman, so I think it's interesting that Sana would say this. But the other thing is in the next chapter slash episode, maybe not the next chapter, so it might be a few more down the line. But do you remember in the episode where Akito laughs, thinking about something that him and his family were talking about? I think it's in the Promise Summer episode, actually,
Yeah.
where,
Hmm.
you know, Fuyuki makes that joke about Akito marrying Sana. And then he's like, oh, she needs a Mukoyoshi, basically. And Fuyuki's like, ah, so dad will be all alone. And then they all laugh. But that's the explanation behind that joke later on. Did any of what I just said make sense?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like I wouldn't have known what that meant.
Yeah, I definitely I spiraled like looking
No,
into
no,
that.
that's really interesting. And I feel like probably there's a lot of people who might have saw that and were like, what does that mean? Like, and some people don't really go and research it like you do. So that thank you for putting the work into it to share with everyone today.
Of course. Thank you for listening to my translation fixation of the
Of
week.
course. We need a jingle for it.
I know. I'm like, are we gonna do that? Is that gonna be a thing? Yeah, I love the moving scene as well in
Mhm.
this episode. Though I do think that the anime did Akito really dirty because in the manga, he's not reading manga, he's helping.
Yeah, I guess in the anime they just want to convey more how kind of laid back he can be. I don't know.
I don't know
Just a
either.
thought.
It's like, how dare you make my boy look lazy? He can be, but not right now. And I love, 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 and will love forever the relationship that Akito has with Tsushi's little sister. I think it's precious and very sweet.
Yes, it's like an even older brother
Yeah.
relationship.
I love it. I love that he calls her Squirt. It just It's everything.
Hmm.
Aono gets a lot of additional screen time in my fan fictions because I love that relationship so much. Oops. Anything else about the moving scene? Or do we want to bop along to the next school day?
Next school day.
This is a small, I wouldn't say pet peeve, because that feels aggressive. But like we are entering a scene in which Tsuyoshi announces to the class that like, his parents are divorced, he has a new last name now, and so
Hmm.
like will be the same, but please just call me Sasaki now instead of Oki. And then we, as a fandom, never acknowledge this episode again, and everywhere in like the books, on like the Kodocha wiki, everywhere it says Tsuyoshi Oki, even though he was only Tsuyoshi Oki for 12 episodes.
Yeah, and even I'm guilty of this too on my channel. Like I like was thinking about that after I rewatched this episode, and I like for some reason like I thought it was backwards. Like I thought he changed it to Oki because I hadn't watched this episode in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then like I just hear on my YouTube channel and I'm like cringing at myself, like, oh
Yeah.
no. Because I want to be as accurate as possible. However, there is one moment in the anime I remember. It's a filler episode, and I know it's so random to remember this, but I remember it because I put it in one of my out of context compilations on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
There's this part in one of the fillers. It's about that one when there's like this quote unquote organization out to get Sana, and they find out that they're like
Yeah.
doing like a show or something. I can't remember, but they're on a
Mm-hmm.
boat basically, and Sana and Sanjiro are up there, and I think they're like dressed as fish and they're dancing around. And Akito and Tsuyoshi, they believe Sana's in danger, so they sneak onto the ship. And when they attack, Akito he goes and he does his like head chop onto one of the guys, and he's like Hayama chop, and then they cut over to Tsuyoshi and he bites somebody's arm and he says Sasaki bite. I guess
Ah,
to kind of make fun of like how shonen anime like they announce their attacks when
yes.
they bite. And I just noticed that in that filler episode. So they do acknowledge it in that, but I do feel like as a fandom, like most of the time you do see Oki attached to his name and you don't really see Sasaki popping up as much.
No, no, and it's such a stupid thing for me to like. That's it's like why is this my hill? But I've decided this is my hill with Tsuyoshi. Is his last name. But something else about his both last names that I find really interesting. Here's another little Japanese something for you, is that both names have the same kanji at the end of it. So it's the kanji ki, which means tree because it looks like a tree. So there you go. There's a little throwaway kanji fact for you. Sasaki and Oki both have ki.
All right, interesting.
Yeah. I love this scene too. I love Ayasukita, our sweet baby.
Yes, she's so adorable.
That's exactly what like my notes say. It just says Aya is adorable in all caps because she is. She's so precious. And I love this scene too where they like start to unravel Tsuyoshi's perceived love for Sana so quickly.
Yeah. And I also like how like Sana was just never able to figure out like how AF felt about Tsuyoshi.
Oh my god, she's so dense. She's like, wow, Aya's a big worrywart. I'm just like,
Yeah,
girl, what?
even Babbitt knows, and it's pretty sad when even Babbitt knows and
Oh,
she doesn't.
for sure. For sure. Oh my goodness. And I love that. I think that they call it random acts of chocolate, and that really also made me laugh a lot.
Hmm.
But a little sub note I observed is that in that scene, Tsuyoshi calls Aya by her last name, Sugita. And then by the next episode, when they're walking home together, they have shifted from last names to Aya-chan. So I'm like, ooh, already on a first name basis. Okay.
Well, Tsuyoshi, he
Scandal.
moves pretty fast.
Seriously, I'm like, the next scene. I love it.
I'm glad they stayed together through the whole series.
I think so too. Yeah.
Probably the most unrealistic thing about Kodocha, but I'll let him have it.
Slash like all shoujo anime. Like I feel like everybody, all these junior high relationships making it to marriage because trauma bonds. is
Yeah.
not necessarily true to life. But when I was 12, I was like, surely this could happen to me. But then I think about the boys I knew when I was 12, and I'm very glad it didn't pan out that way.
The only relationship that matters in that way that like I can believe continued onward, and like maybe it's just because I'm so biased, but it is Sana and Akito. I'm sorry. Like
Oh,
it's
for
just
sure.
too perfect.
I also, I mean, I'm gonna say what I said, trauma bond. But
Yes,
yeah, but
of
I
course.
do agree. I do think that they make it. I do think they make it with some therapy, but other than that.
Yeah.
Also, I love that scene with Tsuyoshi's birthday. Like, also just like a general observation. I love that when they sing happy birthday, that it's to the tune of like always be with you slash don't cry for me. I love how like happy birthday is a copyrighted song. And so when you see it in TVs and movies, like it's always off.
Hmm.
It just really tickles me.
Now, I don't know if this is still true. I'm gonna Google search it real quick because I
Ooh,
don't want
about
to.
happy birthday?
Yeah, I don't want to spread information or
Please do.
misinformation.
Because I'm repeating what I heard on another podcast about from it's one of the many sitcom rewatch podcasts that exist out in the world talking about that. And it was a problem when that show was being shot, which was like late 90s, 2000s, but like that could have changed in 20 years. I'm certainly open to learning more.
Okay. I don't know where I learned this from because I can't find it anywhere. Like, I don't know if where I heard this, but like, and we can include this in the podcast since I'm not saying it's for fact, but I could have swore Paul McCartney of the Beatles wanted to buy the rights to that song at one point.
Huh, that is very fun. You'd
Would
think
have
that
been
that song would be in
interesting.
the public domain by now, because it's got to be like a bazillion years old, but like maybe not. But I know anecdotally through this other podcast that I listened to that the reason that there's that alternate happy birthday song that's like happy birthday to you is because of that precise issue.
Oh, I do
Um,
actually have one other fun fact about the birthday song.
Give it to me. I'm ready.
So, and this is really just a personal fact, but it's still interesting. So, the sisters that wrote that song, I actually know a person who they live in a house across the street from the house where that song was written.
What? That's
Yeah.
cool. That's very cool. Enduring international hit. Like incredible. The happy birthday
Well,
song.
I don't think he lived there when it was written, but he lives there and he that was where it happened to be written.
Still, like that's got to be like a historic landmark, right? Like
Yeah. I thought that was very interesting.
it is very interesting. That's very fun. But I love that they just put the words to like an existing Kodocha song. Should like when it
Yeah.
is our birthdays, like should we just
Yeah, why
start doing
not?
happy birthday that way?
Sure, let's do it.
I also love the part where Zenjiro is like, wait, who is Tsuyoshi? I thought it was your birthday, Sana.
So I was actually going to bring this up earlier, but I thought, we'd wait until the end because this happens at the
Ooh.
end. But this was
Mhm.
a change I thought very interesting. And I like how it happened in both the anime and the manga, but I think I prefer it in the anime just because they made it a little more mysterious. So at
Mhm.
the end of this episode, Akito and Sana are walking home after they see Tsuyoshi interacting with his dad, and they come to that mutual respect and agreement that things are going to be different. And so Akito asks Sana about her dad, and this is
Yeah.
handled very differently in the manga. Now in the anime, they leave you on that cliffhanger where she's like, "You want to know about my dad?" And
Mhm.
it's big mystery. In the manga, it's still mysterious, but there's more of an explanation. And I believe Ray is also in this scene as well. So
Yeah.
Ray's kind of helping Sana navigate through this conversation with Akito. So in the manga, basically she responds with like, oh, well, I'm not supposed to talk about that because I promised my mom I wouldn't talk about that. And then like he asks more questions like,
Mhm.
well, was your mom married? Yes, she was. So that guy was your dad? No, he wasn't my dad. And like it's kind of
Yeah.
like a really complicated situation. Like that like it's gonna be brought up again. It's obviously foreshadowing, but I did like how they did it in the anime. because they really did make it more ambiguous there.
Oh, for sure. It's a great episode cliffhanger because it's such a odd moment like in the middle of the chapter, I feel like, because I think it takes
Hmm.
place like between the moving scene and the next school day in the manga
Yeah.
where like Ray just like pulls over really quickly and like pulls Akito out of the car. It's like never
Mhm.
ask about that because one time I did and they looked at me weird. Like that's essentially what happens.
Yeah, it was more kind of just like there was that foreshadowing, obviously, but it wasn't
Mhm.
done in the same way where it was emphasized like they do in the anime.
Oh, for sure. And I'm going to be honest, like I don't remember the next episode super well, although I think it's Promise Summer Part 1, isn't it? Episode 14?
Yeah, I
Like
think so.
yeah, so like we're cut, but I don't remember the beginning of that episode, like if they how they resolve it in the anime.
Hmm.
My brain just
Yeah,
skips to when they're at camp. Do you
yeah,
remember?
mine
I
does
might need
too.
to watch it. I might just need to watch it. Although that might be a next episode recap topic, right? Because we talked about doing Promise Summer Part 1 and Part 2
Yeah,
for an
absolutely. I mean,
episode.
that's one of the best episodes or group of episodes in the series. I mean, there are a lot of the whole series, the anime is great. I mean, like have talked about before, I think the ending is a little messy. But I think overall, like there are just some great episodes in this whole series scattered throughout. And I feel like in the beginning we have like one after the other of just like solid
Yeah,
storytelling.
agree. I mean, interesting that that might have something to do with the fact that that's when they were following the manga, but
Well, yeah, I mean,
I'm just saying.
we'll we'll get there and
I
we'll talk
know.
about those things. And
Ooh, it's
it's not
fine.
even it's not even the filler. Like I like Kodocha filler for the most part. I
Yeah.
think those episodes are funny and entertaining. But there's just some plots that are like, what is happening?
I know.
Why?
Yeah, it's for me, it's always gonna be just like the stuff that like negates or changes what's in the original text. Like that's always gonna be my complaint. Or like, because I don't mind the filler that like adds to the world as like a world building tool. It's not my favorite, but like I'll take it. But some of these
Hmm.
arcs, especially coming up in the second season, are just like, wait, what?
Yeah. Hmm.
So, it's fine. Although, hey, in like what, 5, 6 weeks, Kodocha season 2 release.
Yes, and I just want to make it clear. Like, I just want to broadcast it to everyone listening to this podcast right now. Buy Series 2 Blu-ray when you can. Like, if you can't buy it immediately, buy it when you can. Like, we need to support this series and, of course, the work that Discotech does because preserving this stuff is very, very important, and I'm very passionate about this. And I feel like if we can increase those sales numbers for the series and not just the second Blu-ray coming out, but also, if you haven't already, get Kodocha Series 1 on Blu-ray as well.
Mhm.
You can get it, I believe the site's Right Stuff Anime.
Yeah, and Amazon.
Yes, Amazon as well. And I'm sure there's other places you can get it as well. Definitely purchase the series if you can, like, because if we can increase these sales numbers and not just Discotech Media, but if people see that these numbers for the series are, they're going up, then they know that, companies will know that, okay, this is a series that makes money. And I think, it's really our best chance at getting some sort of anime reboot that could be like the Fruits Baskets reboot, where it follows the manga more closely. And of course, I have my concerns with the reboot, but I think this is extremely important for everyone in the Kodocha fandom to do. Definitely purchase it as soon as you can, as soon as you have the funds to do so. Purchase this Blu-ray because you're not only supporting a company that does amazing work at preserving these series that are old school, that deserve to be remastered and have these subtitles, and it's just great for the anime community as a whole. And just I'm I love the Internet Archive and preserving old media. That's like my other thing that I really enjoy. So like I think that stuff is very important, and I just feel like this is a very, very big deal for the Kodocha fandom. Like this is probably the biggest thing that we've had like since the Funimation release, obviously. And we really need to come together as a fandom to support this. And I'm sorry I'm rambling now, but this is just very, very important to me. And I just think this is something that needs to be supported, because there's so many things that get lost to time. And this is one of those things that just could have just gone by the wayside, and we never could have gotten an official sub for it. So definitely support this company and definitely support Kodocha. It's just crucial.
Yes, really gotta echo everything Ari just said. Like we have a lot of fans who, love to talk about like, oh, it'd be so great if we got a reboot. Oh, it'd be so great if we got a reprint of the manga. Like, it'd be so great if we got all these things. We're not gonna get those things unless we like mobilize our consumer choice to show companies in charge of our horrible capitalist society that this makes money, and that they will make
Exactly.
money by working on this series. So please, please, please support Discotek by purchasing season 1 and 2, and also just like be vocal with your love for the series online. Like I think we really do need to mobilize more voices, more discussions, more chatter around Kodocha in order to make some of these things work. And also, like every month when Seven Seas releases their survey, take it and say that you would like a Kodocha reprint. That's all you have to do.
Yes.
Just like fill out the
Yes.
survey.
Mhm.
Because that's how we get more things. And also, like this is not something we've talked about before. I would love it if we could like work to get one of the anime streaming services to stream Kodocha, because that would get more people with our cause generally.
Yes, because this is
So
a series also that just it doesn't get the same level as of promotion or hype that a lot of shoujo series get. And I'm actually going to talk about this in a future video. But even the shoujo series that we see getting a lot of hype, we see Sailor Moon's a big one, Cardcaptor Sakura. Notice that these shows also have that action element as well. We don't get a lot of representation for the slice of life genre, the more realistic fiction. And we need to get this on the surface, I think. I think anime, if they just knew about these shows, I feel like they would be more willing to watch them if they were just promoted more. And I totally agree that getting them on a streaming service like
would be huge. I mean, yeah, I think it'd be great if we could like, if Netflix wanted it, but I'm also dream big princess and I will be the negative Nelly. Like,
yeah, same here.
that's always how we go. But yeah, like just if we could, I don't know, I'm not gonna say start a petition, but like if we could get a lot of active requests in to those existing streaming services, asking them to stream Discotek's Blu-ray version of Kodocha, that would be so sick and would help so
Yeah.
much, because I do think some of what holds the fandom back is the fact that like a couple of things. Like I know that some folks like just financially it's not really available to them to spend $80 on 2 Blu-rays. I get that.
Mhm.
But at the same time, like that is how we move forward. So it's complicated. But I also just want to say like the value of these Blu-rays like is huge. Back in the
Mhm.
day when Funimation would release a DVD, it would have what, 4 episodes on it, and they would charge $30 for it. I'm gonna let you do that
Yeah.
math on how much it would cost at that time to purchase every single Kodocha DVD.
Well, now, it's even worse because, you have people selling them online for $50 a pop now, and
Which
it's
is
like, oh
stupid.
gosh.
Like, yeah, which is just foolish. So like the value of the Blu-ray is huge. 51 episodes for like, $50 is not bad at all. And honestly, and Right Stuff has sales pretty regularly too on both. So, and I always post about those on Daily Kodocha to try to encourage some folks to buy it. I saw season 1 go down as low as like $28 once, which is, in
Mhm.
my opinion, extremely reasonable. So,
Oh yeah, for
yeah,
how many episodes
for how many episodes?
episodes
Yeah,
that
truly.
is?
I'm like, if my 13-year-old self knew that one day I would own all 102 episodes of Kodocha for me to watch whenever I wanted for under $100,
Mhm.
she'd be floored. I feel like we are ranting at this point. Like, we've moved from rambling into ranting. Like,
Yeah, but it needs to be said.
we
The
love
fandom.
Kodocha. Please spend money on it.
Yes.
I would like to spend more money on Kodocha. There's nothing left to buy.
So, do you have any closing thoughts on the episode today or the chapter?
Just a couple. Like, I love Akito is so cute in this episode too. Like the moment where he's like, that eliminates two rivals. Very cool and
Yeah.
fun. And then also just how jealous he was when Tsuyoshi, made jokes about marrying Sana. That was very cute and fun. I love him so much. But I think that's it for me. Great episode.
Yeah, definitely
You?
one of my favorites. Yeah, it's like I said, it's one of my favorite episodes. We get some more backstory on our boy Tsuyoshi, who's one of my favorite characters in the series. He's definitely in my top 5. And yeah, I also liked how this anime doesn't rely heavily on these tropes for their side characters. So, I think we touched on this a while back, but Tsuyoshi, he's not like Umino from Sailor Moon.
Yeah.
He's not just some goofy kid with glasses who rages or gets all crazy every once in a while. And, he's got a lot of depth to him. And really, I love Tsuyoshi also because he's such a big advocate for Sana and Akito getting together. And
Yes.
he deserves so much love in the fandom, I think.
Oh, for sure. Our sweet boy. He's the number 1 Sana Aki shipper, actually. And
yes.
But this is just a random note that I just kind of remembered, is Obana says in one of her author's notes that she had considered making him like a psychic with telekinetic powers.
Oh yeah.
At one point, and she decided not to, and like because she wanted to keep the series more realistic. But like, can we imagine for just a moment, like in our theater of the mind, what the heck that would have been like?
Yeah, I think that would have been interesting, but she in a weird way she conveyed it through just like the fact that he's very perceptive. Like she just basically took that idea but was like, well, how can I make that more realistic, and turned him more into somebody who's very empathetic. And I would say that Tsuyoshi's good at reading people, but when it comes to girls, I think so, that he gets a little distracted a bit there, but I think overall he's very good at picking up on how others feel and what they're thinking.
Yes, definitely agree. He's the best boy. Good chat as always.
Yes. So thanks everybody for listening. I had a great time as always, and I hope you all enjoyed listening to us today. I know we got really heated there at the end, but
did.
It was worth it.
It was fun.
Very worth it. Yeah.
Now you guys have seen the real us.
Yes, because I'm pretty, I feel like overall my vibe online is pretty tame, but people know I'm passionate about this series. But like sometimes if you really get me talking, like it just comes out, like my inner extrovert comes out.
Yeah, I definitely hear you. I have no idea what my vibe online is. It's a
nice,
vibe.
Really enjoys cutesy things. I don't know.
I appreciate that. I think probably, and this is a problem that I have as a person, is that I make jokes too much. And that sometimes people don't know when I'm doing a joke.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're funny too, so.
Well, I appreciate that, my friend. Oh,
right.
Bless. Alrighty, guys. We will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to 19 O'Clock News, a Kodocha podcast.
19 O'Clock News is hosted by That Kodocha Girl and Mahou Shoujo M.
We love making new friends. Feel free to join us in the Kodocha Discord under Kodocha_media.
19 O'Clock News is not affiliated with any current or previous rights holders to Kodomo no Omocha by Mahou Obana.